Welcome to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast where seeing things differently inspires limitless possibilities. This podcast is being brought to you by Blind Beginnings, an organization based in Vancouver, Canada, that supports children and youth who are blind or partially sighted, along with their families. Limitless was created in order to inform, educate, entertain, and share stories from within the blind and partially sighted community in order to show the world that the opportunities for those who are blind or partially sighted are truly limitless. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to your host, the Executive Director and Founder of Blind Beginnings, Shawn Marcellet.
Welcome back to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Marcellet, and we're so happy you've joined us today. Today, we are talking about volunteering, and two of our co-hosts are with me today, Clement and Ishita. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. It's
Thank you.
Why don't you guys introduce yourselves for our listeners?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ishita, and I am a new youth leader, just joined at the beginning of this year. And I have a condition called cone rod dystrophy, which primarily affects my central field of vision. So I can see general shapes and colors, but I have issues with seeing finer details.
And my name is Clement. I'm one of the youth mentors here at Blind Beginnings, and I am from Vancouver. I have a condition called Nori disease, which is extremely rare. And as a result, I was born totally blind, so I have no vision whatsoever.
And of course, I'm Shawn Marcellet, and I have retinitis pigmentosa, so my vision has gradually deteriorated basically all my life. So today we're talking about volunteering, but not just volunteering. Like, definitely we're going to talk about the benefits of volunteering, but also the reason I thought this was an interesting topic is because it often can lead to a paid position, and it has for all of us. So we're going to talk about that too. But maybe we can just start with, when was the first time you volunteered? Do you guys remember?
Yeah, I do. My first volunteering, I would say like actual volunteering experience, because I did volunteering like in school with clubs and that stuff. But again, it was more so just work that they expected us to do in school. So my first volunteering experience was through the city of Surrey, which is where I'm from. And they came to our school and asked us if we wanted to volunteer with their events. So it was a whole process where I had to apply and I had to do an interview and eventually wait to see if I got the position, which I did, luckily. It was in a position for the Children's Festival at the time. So I was essentially working at one of the tents, which was a storytelling tent, and sort of like coordinating stories and helping the children, get along, and just sort of being general aid in that tent. So that was my first experience volunteering, and I was in, I believe, the 8th grade at the time.
Awesome. What about you, Clement?
I think my first volunteer experience was actually with you, Shawn. I believe it was Camp Bowen. Oh, memories. Back in 2009, during the summertime, I volunteered for the Braille Literacy Camp.
Cool. And I know, but tell us what was your role?
So my role at the time was mostly to act as a counselor and facilitator for some of the activities, most prominently Campfire. That was, I think, my first time actually kind of having the wherewithal and the opportunity to actually lead it. Other than that, it was mostly just kind of helping out wherever I could with the Braille activities and making sure that the kids got to where they were supposed to be and were in the groups they were supposed to be, mostly things like that.
And I have to think way back to remember my first volunteer. It was during high school, and our high school hosted a festival, a music festival for concert bands and jazz bands. And I was helping out at an information table, and we had to file, like the adjudicators would bring in their envelopes with their score sheets for each band, and or they'd be requesting for the next band, and it was a lot of filing, which I was not particularly good at, being visually impaired. And I remember that I ended up answering a lot of questions about where's the bathroom. Giving directions became my role, which was not very fun, but thankfully I did try volunteering after that. It wasn't a great experience, but it made me realize that finding something that I can actually feel like I could contribute in a meaningful way is really important in volunteering.
Wasn't high school like 10 years ago for you, Shawn?
Ah, thanks. Yeah, we'll go with that. But did you guys have any negative experiences when you first started volunteering?
I mean, I had a lot of times when people told me I couldn't, just by virtue of being totally blinded in high school. And at the time, I wasn't great at advocating for myself. So, it was kind of a lot of me asking, what's there to volunteer for? And they'd be like, oh, these are the options. And I'd be like, well, I'm not exactly sure where I could fit in, so I'm willing to try pretty much anything. And they'll, people would say, "Oh, we'll get back to you," and they wouldn't. So I'd say those are probably like the earliest experiences I had of negative attempts at getting involved in volunteering.
Yeah, that's definitely frustrating to offer your services for free and have somebody turn you down, right?
Yeah, and it would be anything from volunteering to help out at a club to, speaking about blindness, which something that I love doing, and I would be happy to do it as often as I can. But there's there at the time especially, it was kind of a thing where people were like, we'll see if there's ever a time when it can happen, and then it just never happened.
So, how did you guys get started? Like, for me, I feel like opportunities just presented themselves and I said yes, but I don't know that I actually ever sought out not initially anyways, not when I was young. Like how did it happen for you, Ishita?
I did a little bit of both in the sense of some fell in my lap, and like I said, where they came to my school and told us about the city of Surrey and asked us to volunteer, and I said sure, I'll give it a try. And some I actively seeked out and thought it was interesting and wanted to just give it a try. And I'll get into this a bit when I talk about my employment, but that was an experience where I found it, and I'm like, I actually really want to try this, and I gave it a try. So it was a little bit of both, but it was also more so just saying yes to a lot of the things that came my way. And I'm like, I want to try this. This is really interesting. If it doesn't work out, it's okay. Because I've had experiences similar to Clement where they refused me, or they said, we don't think you'll be a good fit, or it's very visual work. And they said essentially no, but I kind of fought it. And I'm like, no, I want to do it. There isn't any reason why I can't. One experience that comes to mind was when I did environmental cleanups. So they were kind of worried that the plants that were there had thorns and had stuff that I could prick myself on. And, we were wearing protective clothes and gloves. So I said there shouldn't be any reason why I can't do it. And I was with a friend. So I said I would be with someone at all times in case something happened. They were really hesitant to give it to me. And I applied for it multiple times and they kept saying, maybe not, maybe you can do something else. But I just, I'm like, no, I want to do it. And I eventually did it. I didn't go back because I just didn't like it, but I still gave it a try and I wanted to do it. So it was saying yes to the opportunity that came my way. That was, I would say, how I found most of the volunteering opportunities that I had.
Okay. So I'm just curious. I love that you pushed until they let you try it, but in the end, was the reason you didn't like it anything related to like getting pricked by thorns and it being painful?
No, it was just really hot. I felt like the heat. It was in the summer and I hated the heat. So it was fun that I got to hang out with my friend and we ended up doing other things. It wasn't anything to do with the experience and stuff. It was just me not wanting to be in the heat. That was the only reason why I decided not to do it.
So their concerns were not necessary.
No.
Yeah. Love that. What about you, Clement? How have opportunities just sort of presented themselves, or have you ever sought out a volunteer position?
I mean, it's really been a mix of both. I've especially with places like Blind Beginnings and CNIB and other like kind of visually impaired communities in BC, like those opportunities have kind of just come along whenever people pass them around. But like a lot of other ones, the two that I'm thinking about are most of the opportunities that I've had in the community are church-based, and that was, those were a few of those were ones I sought out. So one of the first ones was just, shortly after becoming a Christian, I wanted to get more involved and kind of directly plugged in with the church I was at. So that there was a lot of asking about things that I could do or where I could help out at, because the the church I attended at the beginning was one of the biggest churches in Vancouver, so there's volunteer opportunities everywhere. So you can ask for things, and I asked for quite a bit, but it's definitely been a mix. The one that comes to mind is the one that I'm still volunteering at. It's the International Students Ministry at the church. I was looking for something to do, and I was asking the director. I was talking to him during lunch one Sunday, and we were talking about how his primary guitarist had left to go back to Korea, and I was like, "Well, I happen to play guitar," and so it was kind of I think that one kind of was a little bit of both. I mean, because he was the one who told me about the International Students Club in the first place. And he was saying how he was always looking for volunteers, and then that conversation came up. So there was a bit of give and take with that one, I feel. So I did ask him, for the chance to help out because I could with the guitar and with sound and tech stuff. But he also was the one who introduced me to the ministry in the first place. So
I'm thinking about one volunteer opportunity that I guess was presented to me. I don't even remember. It was with the City of New Westminster on their access committee. So they were looking for somebody with a disability to sit on this committee to help kind of make the city more accessible for people with disabilities. And I was like 19, maybe. I was young, and I'd never really been on a board before. And I went to this meeting at City Hall, and everybody was like in suits and seemed important. And I'm just this basically kid. And it was so intimidating. And I probably didn't speak for, most of the meetings that I went to. Have you guys had that experience of just feeling like, yeah.
Yeah. I was invited to a youth learning summit. It was like a provincial dialogue about education among students with disabilities. And I was the youngest kid there. I think I was in grade 9 or 10, and everybody was in like grade 12. And the premier was there. Mr. Campbell was there at the time. And so I was like 2 hours. I think it was like it was in a UBC lecture hall. It was the full kind of setup with desks and mics and all that kind of thing. And it was my first time ever being there. And I was sitting there and I was like, what am I doing here? Like, everybody else is saying all these really, really smart sounding things. And I'm like, I don't even know I don't know what's happening right now.
Yeah.
So definitely can relate to that experience for sure.
I wouldn't say I had something like similar to that, but well, kind of. It was more so, again, when I was with the city of Surrey, and I was doing something called like a tree lighting festival, which is at least in Surrey. I know it's in a lot of other places as well, where during Christmas, they kind of have like a huge Christmas tree set outside and they light it. And it's like very pretty and it's very nice. So I was doing the photos with Santa inside, and it was very adorable to see like all the kids and all the parents being very happy. So I was essentially just in charge of making sure the photos got to the parents' emails, and very important job. So after, I think, towards the end of the evening, we got asked to go to the VIP room, which was where a lot of the people and sort of like political figures were there, because I don't know why. They were just kind of there. And we got asked to sort of be a part of that, taking pictures with their kids and all that aspect. So I was totally just prepared to kind of be on the side and just do my job there. But a lot of people kind of got curious about my vision. And it was, I think, like the mayor and some other people within the city who were asking me questions. And I was just really unprepared for it, because again, I wasn't something that I signed up for. But talking about that, it was really odd to me, because it was the first time sort of talking to people, outside of my friend group and people that I kind of have to interact with every day. It wasn't necessarily something I signed up for, but it was just a really odd and funny experience that I thought was like, oh, I got to be in a VIP room for once. Got to feel really fancy and important for that day.
Yeah. And that's a really, interesting point, is how our visual impairment is, I guess, how people react to it in a volunteer situation. I feel like, honestly, most of my volunteer opportunities have been related to disability in some way. So it's generally seen as an asset. My experience, my lived experience is important and respected. Although there have been a couple of situations where it had nothing to do with blindness. And then it's a factor, right? It's like,
yeah,
yeah, like people are going to have questions and people are going to wonder how you're able to do things. And it can catch you off guard if you're not ready for that.
Some people will just also just have doubts, not even questions. Like some people will just have either preconceptions or prior experiences with other people with disabilities where it may not have gone well, and so like when the next person comes on, they're like, I don't know. Yeah. Whereas I think, like Shawn, you had a great point. Whereas when you're volunteering in the field of disability, or specifically even just blindness, it's much less of a factor because everybody knows what the deal is, and there's less kind of unfamiliarity to tread over. Whereas if you volunteer at something that has no blind or visually impaired people, and you're kind of the first one, people are like, "Whoa, what do we do with this?"
Yeah, almost all of my experience outside of Blind Beginnings have been non-disability related. So for me, Blind Beginnings is a really new opportunity for me where I don't have to sort of constantly explain my vision or explain like these kind of things that people outside of the blind community may not understand. It's odd. Like it's actually really nice for me. It's a really new and enjoyable experience for me, but like Clement was saying, the sort of like the miscommunication for me is because of me being partially sighted. People either assume I'm totally blind or I can see a lot more than I can. It's a very odd thing that I have to consistent sort of explain. I'm not sure how it is for you, Shawn and Clement, but for me, I'm constantly having to say, oh, I can see this, I can do this. I'm assuming that I can't. Or me saying, no, I actually can't see that. But, it's a lot of back and forth with that for me and a lot of the volunteering experiences that I've had.
Yeah, I would imagine you have both experiences. Sometimes people will expect you to be able to see better than you can. And then other times people would expect you can't do things that you can do, which is confusing for people, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I'm thinking of, I volunteered at a youth center after university, and like I was, I guess, in my mid-20s, just finished my degree. I thought that I wanted to work with youth at risk. So I got this position at a youth center. And at that time, I was not using my cane all the time. I probably should have been, but my vision was kind of, good enough that I could kind of like fumble my way through life. And I could pretend that I was sighted, even though I really struggled in a lot of ways. So I can relate to what you're talking about. And I think, the kids that came into the drop-in center didn't necessarily know I was visually impaired. And I was a little bit intimidated by them. So I didn't really want them to know. But then it also made me feel really uncomfortable because if I didn't catch something, they wouldn't, realize that. And it was just very stressful and difficult, actually.
Yeah, explaining it to kids is a whole other ballpark, I think. I've worked with kids a lot with my volunteering, like in daycares and again with a lot of the festivals that I did. And it's always a talking point, I think. I try to make it into like a game where they can sort of guess. A lot of I get like, are you a superhero? I'm like, if you want to think I am, sure. I mean, that's cool. But I try to be very honest with them and let them know in like the language that they can understand. But it's always an experience and it's very different. Like the reactions are very different and it's actually kind of interesting and fun to see sometimes.
So let's talk about some of the benefits of volunteering, because there are a ton. Like, yes, it can be scary to get started sometimes, and it can be frustrating when people turn you down when you're offering yourself to volunteer. But when you actually do find a good fit, it's pretty great, I think. What would you guys say are some of the benefits?
I think one of the things for me is it's open season for spreading awareness, really. Especially if you're volunteering at a place where you're the only blind or visually impaired person there. Literally no one knows anything, or they don't know a lot about anything related to blindness or visual impairment. So it's really it's golden, especially if you can get plugged in and actually start getting involved in the community deeply. It gives as you do that, more and more opportunities will start to come for you to share with other people, and in return it's learning as well, because you get to find out what people want to know, because it's really interesting. I think we have these kind of it's almost like a template for like, the top 10 questions that people ask people who are blind and visually impaired. But it's really interesting, like when you volunteer and you get to know people, like sometimes you'll get questions that'll catch you off guard and you're like, I never really thought of that one before. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits for me, is that it provides a lot of new opportunities to share awareness, and to gain, for us, on the opposite end, it's also a good opportunity just to gain knowledge of the wider world apart from the one we live in. Because I think a lot of blind kids, I know for myself it was definitely the case, I was very, very, very insulated when I was younger, even all the way until probably I'd say the end of high school. Like the majority of my 90% of my interactions were in the blind community in BC, so it was very different, but it was a huge opportunity for learning that I don't think I would have had otherwise.
Yeah, I totally agree with Clement there. Volunteering has so many benefits, I'd say, especially with advocacy. I think you really learn how to advocate for yourself when people turn you down, or when people have questions for you or make assumptions about you. It's the constant, I think, at least for me, advocating for yourself. But even outside of that, there's so many like sort of benefits to it, in getting experience for school, or for just hours, or getting. I would say the biggest one for me was being confident, learning how to be confident with myself, and learning what I like and I don't like. I was very shy and very just not interested in sort of doing new stuff when I was first getting into volunteering. Like Clement said, I was kind of in my own bubble and I liked staying there. But as new opportunities sort of came to me and I started pushing my boundaries a bit more, I learned how to be more confident and more sure of myself. And again, learning how to advocate for myself, and just knowing what I like and learning when to say no and when to say yes. I would say that was the biggest thing for me that I learned through volunteering.
I think for me, the idea of like applying for a job and maybe my vision impacting my ability to do that job initially, like recognizing that it might take me a little bit longer to figure out what I'm supposed to do, or to learn whatever I'm supposed to do. So I love that through volunteering, there's no pressure. Like you're not being paid. It's you giving your time. If it takes you a bit longer, that's okay. It was a really good way to sort of figure out what happens here in this organization, or in this, whatever it is, and what's my role, and how do I do that role efficiently. And then also prove yourself, right? So like usually I was expecting that it might be harder for me, but then usually it wasn't. It was like everybody needs to learn when they start in a new role, whether they're blind or not. And so it's kind of, oh, hey, I can do this, and learning how to figure out, if you're asked to do something that everyone else is doing on pen and paper, how can you do it if you can't read print or write on pen and paper, right? So just like having to problem solve and work it out, and realizing that, oh, there usually is a solution and there is a workaround, and learning to sort of voice that and figure that out. Yeah, definitely helped with my confidence too.
Yeah, and just like you said just now, problem solving and critical thinking. I think that's something that you'll only find in those opportunities, because it's not, because it's that fine line between, just doing something for fun and a job. It's kind of in that middle ground where if you need to figure out a solution, you can take your time to do it, because there's no stakes usually. Because you're volunteering. It's not like your career is going to be on the line, but at the same time, it's not something you can just kind of throw in and be like, I don't need to worry about it, because it's not a hobby. It is something that does impact your ability to do something. But you won't get less of a paycheck because you couldn't do this, or you won't be able to, it's not like you're going to lose your chance for a promotion because you couldn't do this job or not. It's just a matter of, really gives you that freedom, I think, to play around with your critical thinking and figure out a way to do things that, like you said, that you may not typically think about.
It also helps you figure out what you like and don't like.
Yeah.
And in the case of that youth center, I realized this was not a good fit for me. And and it's funny because I was already done my degree and that's the direction I thought I wanted to go. It would have been good if I had volunteered maybe during university and figured that out, but better late than never. I think, a main one is it's something to put on your resume too, right? If you don't have any work experience but you volunteered a lot, that looks really good. That fills it up. Okay. So let's talk about employment opportunities that have come through volunteering. I guess the first one that I'm thinking of that was kind of really surprising, I joined a board. I think I had only attended 2 board meetings, but I guess I impressed the chair of the board because then he called and offered me this paying gig of training new bus drivers on how to work with people who are blind. And it's a job that I'm still doing like almost 20 years later. So that was a really awesome, here I'm volunteering on this board. I'm just doing my thing, making my contribution, and somebody noticed my capabilities and my strengths and offered me this paid position, which was pretty great.
That's awesome. I think also with this, you kind of learn jobs that can be available to you. Like my job, very unique. I would say not a lot of people know of it. So currently I work at a youth council. I'm the chair of a youth council in Delta. And it started off as a volunteering position, and it's a story. So I first, so it's run out of the office of MP and Cabinet Minister Carla Qualtrough. And I saw her at a speaking event in one of the schools in Delta, and it was about women in jobs and careers, and we got the opportunity to meet a lot of wonderful, amazing people. And I was really interested at the time to, go into law and sort of see what the experience of a visually impaired lawyer or going into law school while being visually impaired was like. And towards the end of the sort of session, Carla walks in, talking about her being an MP and doing law when she was a few years ago. She was a human rights lawyer. And I'm like, I really want to meet her. Unfortunately, didn't get the chance at the time. But we got contacted later and I got the opportunity to meet with her. I did. And it was a wonderful experience getting to talk to her. And she told me to join her youth council. And I was like, what is a youth council? I had no idea. So essentially, youth council basically engages youth on the issues that they're facing. So again, it could be a wide range of issues, and we sort of talk about it, discuss it, come up with solutions, meet with guest speakers who are involved with these issues, and sort of try to make a difference within the community. So I started off doing her briefing notes. Actually, that is when I sort of researched and found out information about the organization and people that Carla was meeting and provide notes to her so she would be aware of what the meeting was going to be about and who she's meeting with. I did that for about eight months or so. I had a lot of fun with it. It was a lot of I got to learn about a lot of companies and a lot of really interesting people that were centered in Delta and also just around the world. She met with a lot of interesting people. And then I kind of also went into the 2019 election and I volunteered with that, which was a really interesting experience as well. And after that happened, I got approached by the leader of the youth council at the time, and he was sort of being transferred over to Ottawa and working on the ministry side of Carla's parliament. And I got approached to work on the youth council as being one of the leaders. So that's kind of where that started a couple of years ago. And this year I got promoted to being the chair. And now I'm sort of in charge of the organization and making sure that everything is running. So it was a very interesting road getting to where I am today.
Mm-hmm. So the chair position is the paid position, right?
Yeah, even the leadership one was.
Okay.
It's about the same position, but it was just that we had changes and sort of people who were staying, and they asked me to take over, and I'm like, yeah, sure. So yeah,
awesome.
For me, it was it's also the job that I technically still do now is teaching international students English, specifically Japanese students, and that's something I never thought I'd be doing either, because I don't actually know that many blind people who teach ESL. I don't actually know any at all. So one of the things that it really started with the time that a friend of mine who I met from a while back in Japan came to Canada for the first time, and she came through an agency for Japanese international students who are studying abroad in Canada. And when she came, it was in springtime, and we usually do a ski trip with all our students up to Grouse for the day. And she said that they were going to find a ski instructor who had teaching experience with people with disabilities, to accommodate her. And she said, but I don't really want to go by myself because that's kind of weird. It's right. Because it's, you don't want to be the only person doing the odd thing out when everybody else is just skiing and snowboarding. So she's like, you want to keep me company? And I was like, sure, if that's okay with everyone, and so she checked with people from the agency, and they said, sure, of course it's fine. And so I went and I met them, and, it was really cool because I'd been volunteering at the International Students Club at church for a couple of years already, and just found that international students were people I just really like to hang around because they were fun. They loved to know anything and everything about Canada. And they also like to share, their culture. And it was my kind of opportunity to learn a lot more about, places that I couldn't afford to go to at the time because I wasn't working. And, I was trying to juggle school and volunteering. So, it was nice to kind of get that international experience without having to actually go anywhere. And so I met up with the people from the agency. We had a great day. And at some point, it got out that I knew a little bit of Japanese and liked Japanese culture. And so everybody kind of, freaked out over that, in the best way possible. And then after the day was over, during dinner, with all the students and staff, the president of the agency came up to me and said, hey, it was so great having you with us today. And I know it sounds like you really have an interest in Japanese culture and language and stuff. So, if you could, if you're willing, would you come help out, at the office, just drop by every now and then, and be a local Canadian rep to the students, and help out with their English and, whatever else, with whether it's Canadian culture or blindness. And I was like, sure. I'd love to. But it was weird just because I didn't know anybody there. My friend was leaving soon, and I was like, I don't know if I really feel like I fit there. I just decided, well, I'll push through and I'll just try it. And so I went for it, and I started to go to the office, once every couple of weeks, and then it turned into once a week, and then it turned into two or three times a week. Just anytime I was done school and I had homework, I wouldn't go home because I can't concentrate at home as well when I do homework. So I went to the office to do work instead. And, it kind of just coincided with the students all coming there, and they started asking me English questions. And it was a great feeling. Like I never really realized how much fun it was. And then a couple years, I think it was probably 2 years after I started coming regularly, the president kind of sat me down and said, hey, so we've you've been coming, for a long time. We love having you here. The students love you. And, you've produced some good results. Like there were a couple of students that got, a significant grade boost, on one of their assignments because I helped them with it, or because I edited their paper for them or whatever. And so, she said, maybe, I think we should start thinking about paying you. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah, you've been here for a while. You're basically part of you're basically unofficially part of, our staff. So we might as well make it official. So that was how that started. And it's been 5 years since.
That's awesome. I love that. It's like the fact that you weren't necessarily even looking for that. You were, it totally caught you off guard, but they just you were just doing what you were doing because you enjoyed it, and they noticed your skills and offered you that opportunity. It's so cool.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about it, and there's 4 times in my life where I've been offered a job through volunteering. And one of them was the youth center. I did work there for pay part-time for a little while, after volunteering. And then the bus driver training, but also at CNIB. I had applied for jobs at CNIB multiple times and not gotten the jobs. And then I volunteered as a peer counselor and was in the peer counseling program, and another job came up and I applied and I did get it. Whether that's like coincidence, but I feel like they now knew who I was and what I could do because I was already sort of in the door. Right. So that was one. And then another one, I was volunteering with this organization called Building Bridges, and the founder of this organization decided she wanted to hire me to help with a project, and looked into funding for hiring a person with a disability, and like went through all those hoops just so she could bring me in. So that was pretty great too.
Yeah. I think it's so wonderful that you're just kind of doing your job, not trying to impress anyone. But it sort of like is really validating that people want you on their team, and they want to employ you and give you monetary compensation for the work that you just like love to do. And just, you didn't mean to get anything out of it. I just think it's so incredible to have that experience.
Yeah. And I think, I wouldn't say, oh, everyone go volunteer because maybe you'll get a job. Maybe you will. It doesn't always happen. But I think if you find the right volunteer placement that you really enjoy, if you love what you're doing, people notice, right? And people want you around if it's evident that you really enjoy what you're doing. So if you think about your younger selves, or maybe people who are visually impaired or not visually impaired, but just feeling really nervous about taking that first step, do you have any advice for those people about volunteering?
Yeah, I would say, and I actually get a lot of questions about it from younger people that I work with or volunteer with. And I just say go for it, honestly. I know it's very scary, and I felt really worried and really anxious the first time I applied for a volunteer position. And I got into my own head, thinking, oh, I probably won't be able to do this, or I don't know how it's going to work out. What am I going to do? I'd say just go for it. Take that opportunity. Don't get in your own head, and just take it and try to roll with it. If it doesn't work out, it's okay. There are so many opportunities out there for you that will come your way, or you can find, and it shouldn't be something that you are stressing about, because again, it's volunteering. You're giving your time to something that you enjoy or that you want to take part in. So, try to go for something that you like and you think you will thoroughly enjoy. But I think sometimes it's not always available. So just try and take the opportunities that are available to you. And that's what I would say. Just go for it.
And I'd agree. I think, one of the things I would say is like Ishita just said, roll with it. And in some ways, I feel like it's almost healthier not to expect that people will accept you the very first time, especially as a very real fact of being blind and visually impaired. Sometimes we will encounter more no's than yeses. And I think that's something that it's really important to come to terms with. And, it's that not give up mentality, that Ishita was mentioning, I think is really, really important. Because it's very easy. It is very easy to get inside your own head. And, I am one of those people. Whenever I try and, get 2 or 3 people who say no, my brain just kind of goes, like, why am I even bothering anymore? And I think that's very natural, but at the same time, it does take a conscious decision. It's not always an easy one, but it does take a conscious decision to say, okay, so that's fine. I've had my time of feeling crappy about being said no to 3 times in a row. What's next? And, I definitely agree. I think you just get yourself out there in whatever way you can. And if it helps, find a friend who is also interested in volunteering with the same thing. And if you get rejected, you get rejected together. And, as I don't like to be a wet blanket, but at least when somebody else is feeling equally crappy, it's better not to be on your own.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. Just go for it. And I guess the other piece is like, what do you have to lose? If you don't try, well, you're not going to be volunteering and you're not going to have a shot at all these benefits.
Yep.
But if you do, you could end up, it could be an amazing thing. So yeah, it's worth the risk, I feel like. And there's so many places to volunteer. So if somebody turns you down, there's another door to knock on. And if one volunteer opportunity doesn't work out, there's always somewhere else you can try. So, well, thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation. I think this has been really valuable, and hopefully we've inspired a few people to try some volunteering.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us back.
You've been listening to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Marcellet. If you have a topic request, a question, or comment, please send us an email to limitless@blindbeginnings.ca. Like and subscribe, give us a rating, and join us again next time.
This podcast has been brought to you by Blind Beginnings, an organization based in Vancouver, Canada, that supports children and youth who are blind or partially sighted, along with their families. Music for this podcast is composed by Shawn Bishop and Clement Chow. Production and audio editing by Rob Minot. For more information about Blind Beginnings and the work it does to support children and youth who are blind and partially sighted, along with their families, visit us on the web at www.blindbeginnings.ca, and also remember to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.